The Social Dilemma was seen by 38 million households in the first 28 days on Netflix, which I think is broken records. And if you assume, a lot of people are seeing it with their family because parents seeing it with their kids, the issues that are around teen mental health. If you assume 1 out of 10 families saw it with a few family members, we're in the 40 to 50 million people range, which is just broken records, I think, for Netflix. I think it was the second most popular documentary throughout the month of September,
I think
or film throughout the month of September.
it is a really well done documentary, but I think it's one of those documentaries that affirmed a lot of people's worst suspicions about the dangers of social media, and then on top of that, it sort of alerted them to what they were already experiencing in their own personal life and like highlighted it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, most people were aware. I think it's a thing everyone's been feeling, that the feeling you have when you use social media isn't that this thing is just a tool or it's on my side. It is an environment based on manipulation, as we say in the film. And that's really what's changed. That, I remember, I was been working on these issues for something like 8 years or something now.
Can you please tell people who didn't see the documentary
What it is,
your background is,
yeah,
and how you got into it?
Yeah, so the film goes back as a set of technology insiders. My background was as a design ethicist at Google. So I first had a startup company that we sold to Google, and I landed there through a talent acquisition. And then started work about a year into being at Google, made a presentation that was about how essentially technology was holding the human collective psyche in its hands, that we were really controlling the world's psychology. Because every single time people look at their phone, they are basically experiencing thoughts and scrolling through feeds and believing things about the world. This has become the primary meaning-making machine for the world. And that we as Google had a moral responsibility to, hold the collective psyche in a thoughtful, ethical way and not create this sort of race to the bottom of the brainstem attention economy that we now have. So my background was as a kid, I was a magician. We can get into that. I studied at a lab at Stanford studied in a class called the Stanford Persuasive Technology class that taught a lot of the engineers in Silicon Valley kind of how the mind works. Some of the co-founders of Instagram were there. And then later studied behavioral economics and how the mind is sort of influenced. I went into cults and started studying how cults work, and then arrived at Google through this lens of, technology isn't really just this thing that's in our hands. It's more like this manipulative environment that is tapping into our weaknesses, everything from the slot machine rewards to, the way you get tagged in a photo and it sort of manipulates your social validation and approval, these kinds of things.
When you were at Google, did they still have the "Don't be evil" sign up?
I don't know if there's actually a physical sign. Was there?
There was
one?
never a physical sign? I thought there was something that they actually had.
I think there was this guy, was it Paul? Not Paul. What was his last name? He was the inventor, one of the inventors of Gmail, and they had a meeting and they came up with this mantra because they realized the power that they had, and they realized that there was going to be a conflict of interest between advertising on the search results and regular search results. And so they knew that they could abuse that power, and they came up with this mantra, I think, in that meeting in the early days, to don't be evil.
There was a time where they took that mantra down, and I remember reading about it online. And
They took it off their page, I think.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
And when I read that, I was like, that should be big news. Like, there's no reason to take that down. Why would you take that down?
Yeah.
Why would you say, well, maybe it could be a little evil? Let's not get crazy.
It's a good question. I mean, I wonder what logic would have you remove a statement like that.
That seems like a standard statement. Like, it's a great statement. Okay, here it is. Google removes "Don't be evil" clause from its code of conduct.
In 2018?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder why. Did they have an explanation? Did it say anything? Underneath there? "Don't be evil" has been a part of the company's corporate code of conduct since 2000, when Google was reorganized under a new parent company, Alphabet. In 2015, Alphabet assumed a slightly adjusted version of the motto.
Do the right thing, yeah.
Do the right thing. Oh, that's a Spike Lee movie, bitch. However, Google retained its original "Don't be evil" language until the past several weeks. The phrase has been deeply incorporated into Google's company culture, so much so that a version of the phrase has served as the Wi-Fi password on the shuttles that Google uses to ferry its employees to its Mountain View headquarters.
I think I remember that, yeah.
Wow.
You get on the bus and you type in "Don't be evil."
I wonder why they decided.
Well, I mean, they did change it to do the right thing. I mean, we always used to say that, just to friends, not within Google, but just, instead of saying don't be evil, just say let's do some good here, right?
That's nice. Let's do some good here. Yeah, think positive. Think doing good instead of don't do bad.
Yeah. But the problem is when you say do good, the question is who's good? Because you live in a morally plural society. And there's this question of who are you to say what's good for people? And it's much easier to say let's reduce harms than it is to say let's actually do good like this.
It says the updated version of Google's Code of Conduct still retains one reference to the company's unofficial motto. The final line of the document is still, and remember, ... don't be evil. And if you see something that you think isn't right, speak up.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, they still have don't be evil, though. So maybe it's much ado about nothing. But having that kind of power, we were just before the podcast, we were watching Jack Dorsey speak to members of the Senate in regards to Twitter censoring the Hunter Biden story and censorship of conservatives, but allowing dictators to spread propaganda, dictators from other countries, and why and what this is all about. One of the things that Jack Dorsey has been pretty adamant about is that they really never saw this coming when they started Twitter.
Yeah.
And they didn't think that they were ever going to be in this position where they were going to be really the arbiters of free speech for the world.
Right.
Which is essentially in some ways what they are.
I think it's important to roll back the clock for people because it's easy to think, that we just sort of landed here and that they would know that they're going to be influencing the global psychology. But I think we should really reverse engineer for the audience. How did these products work the way that they did? So let's go back to the beginning days of Twitter. I think his first tweet was something like checking out the buffaloes in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. Jack was fascinated by the taxi cab dispatch system, that you could send a message and then all the taxis get it. And the idea is, could we create a dispatch system so that I post a tweet and then suddenly all these other people can see it? And the real genius of these things was that they weren't just offering this thing you could do. They found ways of keeping people engaged. I think this is important for people to get, that they're not competing for your data or for money. They're competing to keep people using the product. And so when Twitter, for example, invented this persuasive feature of the number of followers that you have, if you remember, that was a new thing at the time, right? You log in and you see your profile. Here's the people who you can follow, and then here's the number of followers you have. That created a reason for you to come back every day to see how many followers do I have. So that was part of this race to keep people engaged, as we talk about in the film. These things are competing for your attention, that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. But the thing that is the product is your predictable behavior. You're using the product in predictable ways. And I remember a conversation I had with someone at Facebook who was a friend of mine, who said in a coffee shop one day, people think that we, Facebook, are competing with something like Twitter, that one social network is competing with another social network. But really, he said, our biggest competitor is YouTube, because they're not competing for social networks, they're competing for attention. And YouTube is the biggest competitor in the digital space for attention. And that was a real light bulb moment for me, because you realize that as they're designing these products, they're finding new clever ways to get your attention. That's the real thing that I think is different in the film The Social Dilemma, rather than talking about censorship and data and privacy and these themes. It's really, what is the core influence or impact that the shape of these products have on how we're making meaning of the world when they're steering our psychology?